All right, so now that we understand how to subscribe to an observable and obtain the events that it emits and do something to the events inside the closure that we're passing to the subscribe function, I actually want to show you a simpler approach where we don't have to deal with retrieving the values from the event, but rather can just obtain the string that is being emitted directly. And that is by using the subscribe next function. So again, the function is called subscribe, but this time we're have the possibility to pass in 3 different closures. And these closures, they are doing the same thing as I did with the explicit switch statement on the event, but it has the advantage that we actually don't have to implement all of them because they're optional for this subscribe method. So I can just go ahead and delete the ones that we don't need. And as I said before, because we're dealing with a UI text field here, we won't actually deal with error and completed events, and we're only interested into the next events. So this is my opportunity to provide a closure where we receive a string directly. It's actually going to be an optional string. And I also want to put this on the same line here. So here is where we have the string, closing parentheses, and now I want to use the string that we obtain in the next event to update the greeting label. So this is basically the first part of the requirement where we somehow have to add the actually get the name that we have onto the label of the text, and this is how we can do it. We can pass in the subscribe method. I have to use self here. We can pass in a closure to the subscribe method where we get access to the string. The string is the string that the user types into the text field, and basically on every keystroke we're going to update the label. And what we did before by implementing the text field delegate, we can do just in 3 lines right here. So the things that I type into the text field right here will be reflected up here in the greeting label. But there is actually an easier way of doing this, what we're doing here by subscribing to the observable. And remember how I said in the beginning that everything that you learn when using RxSwift are only going to be variations of the concept of an observable and subscribing to an observable? Well, here we have actually a special call that we can use to implement this kind of functionality where we basically want to make sure that what the thing that is being emitted from the observable is being assigned to a property on a UI element. And that's the concept of a binding. So rather than having to subscribe to the name observable, we can actually create a binding using the call bind_to. And the way how we're going to do this is we are accessing the Rx property, the Rx text property of the greeting label. So greetingslabel.rx.text. And this is all we have to do. And here, very clearly, we're telling the computer, the machine, what we wanted to do. We wanted to bind the values that are in the name observable. And remember, the name observable contains the values from the name text field here. So we want them to bind these values to the greeting label. And that is all we have to do to get a functional application here. And now we have this warning here, result of call to bind_to is unused. And this is actually a hint from the compiler that we're creating a memory leak because the binding will be kept around in memory even if the view controller deallocates. So we have to make sure that the binding is deallocated as well. And the way how we can do that in RxSwift is by creating an instance of the disposeBag class. And that we can use to add the binding to the disposeBag, and this will make sure that the binding is going to be released whenever the view controller gets released, and we are freeing the memory rather than creating a memory leak by keeping it around.